metaphysics. Actually, um, I am very much grateful and obliged for Aopa that giving me an opportunity to conduct such session. Logic is admitted to be the chief organ of philosophy throughout the history of Eastern and Western philosophy. Philosophy has traditionally been taken as the uh, key role of whole universe in its logical net. Aristotle, for example, has shown that logic is the chief instrument of thought that brings out the essential structure of language and thought. It is in logic that we have a glimpse of the inner structure of thought, which itself is expressed in language. What is of importance in this connection is that logic provides the foundation for metaphysics in Aristotle philosophy. It is the source of the metaphysical thesis that the world consists of substance, their attributes, and their relation to other substances. With these few words, I am going to begin the section of logic and metaphysics. In this section, there are 10 paper presenters, actually 2 hours. Therefore, 20 minutes is allotted for every contributor. Only 15 minutes the paper presenter, the contributor, can present a paper only 15 minutes and 5 minutes for discussion. We are committed for time. Therefore, please follow it. In the first, I invite Dr. K.M. Narayan Rao. K.M. Narayan Rao is present here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Dr. K.M. Narayan Rao is well known to everybody of Aopa. He is a teacher of Niranjan Government Women's College, ASCA. He is going to present a paper, a critique of the ontological argument. Now, without any delay, I am requesting Dr. K.M. Narayan Rao to start your paper.
Namaskar, everybody. Respected chairperson, office bearers of Aopa, co-speakers, and dear participants. As said by Professor Jhadeswar Ghosh, sir, that I'll be presenting on under the title, A Critique of the Ontological Argument. Well, the ontological argument, as we all know, had its basis in the Platonic ideas. And Plato, while making a classification of ideas, has talked of good as the highest idea. This somehow corresponds to God. Saint Augustine, while explicitly stating this position in his work, The City of God, but this position has been very much developed by Saint Anselm, whom we can say that he has given a definite shape to what is called as the ontological argument to prove the existence of God. Saint Anselm holds God as the greatest conceivable being, and nothing greater than him can ever be conceived or thought of. From this idea of the greatest conceivable being, Saint Anselm has advanced his ontological argument, which can be seen in two forms, an earlier form and then a later development. So in the first form of the argument, we can discuss Saint Anselm's ontological argument, in which I have tried to put forth this argument in a series of steps, So it is something like this. In step one, we can say that we carry in our minds an idea of a greatest conceivable being, and nothing greater than him can ever be conceived of. Then moving to step two, if such an idea exists in the mind alone, then this idea that nothing greater than him can ever be conceived of, because if that exists in the mind alone, and since it exists in the mind alone, is somehow conceived of, so we arrive at a position which seems something contradictory. So moving to the step three, we can say that the greatest conceivable being exists both in mind and reality. And in step fourth, it can be said that the greatest conceivable being who exists both in the mind and reality is God. Therefore, God exists. This is the general structural framework of the first form of the ontological argument of Saint Anselm. Now, with bit of difference, we can move to the second form of Saint Aquinas' argument, where he takes God as having a necessary existence. Now, again, dealing this in the form of steps, we can move with step one as something like this. He says, we carry in our mind an idea of a greatest conceivable being or the most perfect being. Now he says, if God does not exist, then it will make him imperfect. So for God to be perfect, he should have necessary existence. So then moving to the other step, he says, if God's existence is to be proved by his perfection, and and he does not exist, then this will make him imperfect. That is, the idea of perfection of God without his necessary existence is somehow self-contradictory. Hence, God exists. Now, but this second form of the argument has been taken by Descartes, and he has tried to put forth this argument with a slight of much similar to the second form of the argument of what Saint Anselm has put forth. Descartes has tried to put forth his argument much similar to the second form of Saint Anselm's argument, something like this. Again, we can proceed in form of steps. In step one, he says, we bear in our minds an innate idea of a greatest conceivable being or most perfect being. Then moving to step two, we can say this idea cannot correspond to any finite being, since the finite beings are bounded by limitations. Now, step three, this idea hence should correspond to somebody who has a necessary quality of existence. Now, then we can say, since the finite beings have a sort of contingent existence, and God alone has necessary quality of existence, this idea corresponds to God. Now, moving to the last step, we can say that since this idea corresponds to God, and also it would be contradictory to have an idea of a perfect being without necessary existence in reality, so we can finally assert God exists. Now, this argument of Descartes has been formally demonstrated by Brian Davis in his book Philosophy of Religion very nicely in 6 points, one point leading to the other. So he says in the first point, he says the idea of God is the idea of a supremely perfect being. Then he says a supremely perfect being has all perfections. Then he says existence is a perfection. So a supremely perfect being has the perfection of existence. So one cannot think of God except as existing. So God exists. So this is the pattern that Brian Davis has provided. Now, so looking into the entire format of this ontological argument, various criticisms have been advanced against this argument, and the much known criticism, as we all know, has been advanced by the French monk Ganilon, who says that the ontological argument fails to make a distinction between an idea in the mind and something that exists in reality. He argues by taking an example of a most perfect island in the mind, and from that idea of having a most perfect island, one cannot exactly show that such a perfect island does exist in reality. So this is the criticism that Ganilan has provided. But to this, counter criticisms have been advanced. Now it has been argued otherwise. So it has been said that in counter criticism, it has been said that unless something exists in reality, it cannot be said as most perfect. But the most perfect island that Ganilan speaks of may or may not exist in reality. Hence, Saint Anselm and his followers defend the argument from the criticism that has been put forth by Ganilan, that the greatest conceivable cannot be applied to anything finite. It has to be applied to something that has a necessary existence of an infinite sort. So, the defenders, they say that this idea of the most perfect or the greatest conceivable, that was extended by Ganilan to something finite piece of land. Even though it talks of the most perfect island, whatsoever island it may be, we cannot conceive of any island to be of most perfect sort. So because any island whatsoever, it is always a dependent reality, it is not independent. So any extension of the idea of the greatest conceivable being or the most perfect being cannot be extended to anything other than the supreme. So this is how the defenders try to defend the ontological argument from the attack made by Saint Ganilan. But moving to the other criticism that has been put forth by Immanuel Kant, that he observes that the transition from an idea in the mind to its existence in reality is very much fallacious. He says that, take for example, that somebody has suppose I carry an idea of having 20 gold coins or guineas in my pocket, and if I claim that I do really have those coins in my pocket, then it is actually fallacious, because having an idea and actually trying to show that I do really have 20 coins in my pocket is arguing something which is somehow fallacious. So Kant concludes that he is by saying that an idea in the mind proves the existence of the idea, but not its existence in reality. So apart from this argument, Kant has even provided another criticism to this ontological argument by saying that this ontological argument suffers from the fallacy of petitio principii, the fallacy of circular argumentation. Uh, why he says so? Because Kant says that the very idea of existence of God is contained in the idea of the greatest conceivable being or the most perfect being. So the ontological argument somehow assumes what it tries to prove. So that's how this argument commits the fallacy of petitio principii. So some even apart from this, some general criticisms have been extended to the extent of saying that the existence of an entity in reality should be prior to the idea of such existence. But here, God's existence is proved from the mere idea of the greatest conceivable being. So it's a general criticism. Now, apart from this, some other general criticisms do come something like this. Say it says something. It has been said that since we are finite beings, how can we have an idea of a greatest conceivable being who is of an infinite nature and extent? This is to say that whatever ideas that we can carry in our minds are only finite. They can only be finite because we are finite beings. And being finite, how do we, what is the guarantee of having such the idea of the greatest conceivable being in the mind? So here lies another problem. So the criticism is to the very idea of having the greatest conceivable being in the mind. Now, moving forward, another criticism has been advanced by a Christian theologian, Karl Barth, who says that ontological argument is not exactly an attempt to prove the existence of God, but rather it is a prohibition on somebody to think of God as anything less than the greatest conceivable being. So it is a prohibition to think of God as anything less than the greatest conceivable being. So this is another problem. So now, if we look into the positions of Saint Anselm and Descartes, say they do take existence as a quality, but this position has been rejected, has been criticized by Bertrand Russell. He is of the view that existence, when we talk of existence, it is the very nature of a thing, and it can never be said to be an attribute, okay, of that thing. So he tries to exemplify this by taking a phrase, cows exist. And this means to say that there are x's, where x is an existent thing to which the term cow applies, and not that existence is an attribute of the cow. So this is how Russell tries to criticize the ontological argument. Now, again, moving forward, Saint Anselm and Descartes have put forth God as a necessary being, but we know that only propositions can be said as necessary and not things or objects or even the greatest conceivable being. Further, God is necessary, and if we move to a quotation by Massey, he says, then if God is taken as necessary, then it can be expressed in analytic propositions only, as in logic and mathematics. But such propositions do not deal with the actual state of affairs. And if God is an existent being, then he can be given by experience only, as Kant had pointed out long ago. But we know that an empirical proposition, no matter how many times verified, can be probable only. The predicate of any synthetic proposition can be denied without involving us in a self contradiction. So, if there is loving God, then his existence can always be questioned, so he cannot be conceived to be necessary. Thus, any being is probable, so the concept of the necessary being is self-contradictory. In 2 more minutes, I'll be completing, sir. So, moving to two more criticisms are there, which after that I'll be concluding, completing the paper. Now, Jonathan Catterers, he also criticizes the ontological line of thought. He says, though the idea of a perfect being is inseparably linked with the idea of a necessary being, yet, 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 the inference of God's existence from a mere idea of perfection of God is not possible unless it is assumed that the perfect being actually exists in reality. So again, it is something moving in a circle, which has been even pointed out by Immanuel Kant. Now, moving to the last criticism, and it is by Parry Gassendi, who observes that just as one is free to think of a horse as not having wings without thinking of its existence, and it would be a perfection in the horse if such a horse exists. Similarly, one is also free to think of God as perfect without thinking of his existence. So, and this would imply his perfection from his existence. So now the horse without wings is a perfection if such a horse exists, and a horse having perfection of wings is not deemed to have existence. Therefore, the very idea of God as most perfect does not imply his existence. This remains to be proved. So this is the position expressed by Parry Gassendi, and to this, Descartes and his followers they do reply. They extend a defense by saying that as far as God is concerned, existence no doubt is a property, but it is a property, it's an attribute in a strictest sense of the term, as it applies to God alone and forms a part of his essence. And such a parallel cannot be drawn of any other entity or thing whatsoever. Hence, the existence of a horse or triangle should not be compared with the necessary existence of God, since the relationship between existence and essence is different in the case of God from that of a horse or triangle. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. K. Om Narayan Rao. Actually, K. Om Narayan Rao's talk, based on the argument of Plato's conception of good as the highest idea, Saint Augustine has followed a Platonic position. Saint Anselm further developing this position and developed it to the ontological argument. Gauniel, being deeply critical of this argument, expressed this, it would lead to absurd because it applied to other fields. He put forth that the ontological argument fails to distinguish between an idea in the mind and its existence in reality. So thank you to share. It's a very nice paper. Now it is open for discussion. Sir.
Let me begin. Dr. Rao, paper is really very comprehensive. He has covered so many areas. I also was for some time discussing this topic, but he has covered all the areas. When I was thinking that this could have been relevant, and he has already covered that, and I congratulate him for bringing all these into into sphere of discussion. We usually discuss each existence a predicate. In that sense, we try to concentrate and criticize ontological argument that existence cannot be regarded as a predicate. But he has actually covered so many aspects of this question. I congratulate him and I thank him for so clearly presenting the problem. Let others ask questions.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Now the thing is, Dr. Rao has presented all the arguments against the ontological argument, and all the logical contradictions he has mentioned very nicely. But we have to think about the compulsion of Descartes, because Descartes found that other two arguments, causal and cosmological arguments, which were unsuitable for his purpose of establishing a rationalistic structure. For that reason, he borrowed the ideas of Saint Anselm and subsequently Saint Thomas Aquinas in order to build this essence equaling to existence idea. And that is why he has proposed this thing. Now, he was brought into criticism by Kant downwards, by all other thinkers in the line of logic. But the compulsion of Descartes was that ontological argument, and yesterday also I am trying to relate this with our yesterday's discussion, that what actually is a speculative method. So this is so it is a type of speculation that the two things, the causal proof and the cosmological proofs, as they were not suitable because they were empirical in nature, their proof needs empirical verification. So he opted for this ontological argument. So this is my reaction to the situation. Otherwise, the presentation is very nice. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Rightly said, sir. To defend the rationalistic stand and to be away from the experiential stand. Well, as you said, this it justifies his the rationalistic outlook, where he brings in, he somehow merges existence with the very essence. So that's how he justifies his stand to prove the existence of God, and with the conviction to his own personal ground and stand. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. K. Om Narayan Rao. So, due to constraint of time, now we are going to the second participant, Mr. Niranjan Behra. Niranjan Behra is a teacher BB Autonomous Mahavidyalaya, Jajpur, Odisha, is going to present Quine's critique of analytic, synthetic, and distinction. So, without any delay, I am requesting Niranjan Behra to come and
Yes, sir.
present your paper.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Am I audible, sir?
yes, you are.
First, namaskar to all. Esteemed President of this associations, Professor Saroj Kumar Mohanty, sir, and Vice President, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, sir, distinguished dignitaries, respected chairpersons of this academic sessions, Professor Jhadeswar Ghosh, sir, and organizing secretary Lakshman, sir, and my respected teachers and dear friends. I am going to present my paper, The Quine Critique of Analytic Synthetic Distinctions and Synthetic Judgments and Evaluations. This paper aims at giving an exposition of a famous article entitled Quine's Analytic Synthetic Distinction on the one hand and Synthetic Approach Judgment of Immanuel Kant on the other. After discussing the status of the dogmas and the status of synthetic judgment, its source, etc., an attempt has been made to prove that after Quine's criticism of analytic synthetic distinctions, the synthetic approach judgment of Kant remains unaffected. In Quine essay, The Two Dogmas of Empiricism, he has explained that the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgment is dogma. So also reducism, the belief that each meaningful statement is equivalent to some logical construct upon terms which refer to immediate experience. In the present session, we will make an attempt to prepare a critique of the Kantian conception of synthetic approach judgments following Quine's line of argument. Analyticity. Kant's concept of analytic judgment was overshadowed by that of human liveness. All of them broadly defined it to be judgment as negation of which is self-contradictory. But Kant's formulation of it from its use may be restated. Thus, a statement is analytic when it is true by virtue of meanings and indefinitely of facts. Let us have a discussion of the problems connected with meaning, since the analyticity of his judgment is concerned with it. Meanings will not be identified with naming of an entity. Different descriptions may name one entity, but their meanings will be different. Examples: Frex, morning star and evening star, refer to one star, but their meanings are different. A description may stand for a singular term or for a general term. A singular term is true of an entity, but a general term is true of a class of entities which is its extensions. Extension is opposed to intentions. Two terms have same extension but different in intention. For example, creature with a heart and a creature with kidney may have same extension but their intention is not same. What sort of things are meanings? Meaning have their own references. If we can separate meaning from the references, then it will be easy to recognize the synonymy of linguistic forms and analytic of statements. Quine says that here the problem of analytic appears anew. There are two types of analytic statements. The first class is true. The first class is logical true, are of the type 1. No unmarried man is married, which is true under any interpretation of man and unmarried. The second classes of analytic statements are of the type 2. No bachelor is married, which can be logically put synonyms for bachelor. Thus, two cannot be turned into one by quitting unmarried man for a synonym bachelor. We still lack a proper characterization of the second type because the notion of synonymy also need equal clarification like that of analytic. Quine twists the issue to the standpoint of definitions from synonymy. We can bring the second type of the first if we define bachelors as unmarried man. If the question taken place, how do we know that unmarried man is a definition of bachelor? The simple answer is that ordinarily they are ground in usage. But this is not the sufficient interconnection between the two linguistic forms that they will be described as synonymous. Again, he refers to another type of definitional activities, that is, explicative function of kernel. Here, the purpose is not merely to paraphrase the definendum into an outright synonym, but actually to improve upon the defendum by refining its meaning. But Quine points out that still such a definition owes to its explicative functions is pre-existing synonyms. So he concludes that the definitions always hinges on prior relation of synonymy. It does not, means the definition does not hold the key to synonymy and analyticity. Interchangeability. Interchangeability is another possible connections between the two linguistic forms may hold the key to synonymy and analyticity. Two linguistic forms may be called synonymous if they are interchangeable without change of their truth value. Interchangeability of Leibniz fate is solva veritatis. The synonyms bachelors and unmarried men are not always interchangeable. In cases of Bachelor of Arts or Bachelors of Buttons, we cannot replace unmarried man. Considering these phases to be words, Quine proceeds in his analysis under the presuppositions that synonymy cannot be applied to the fragments of a word. The question remains whether interchangeability is a strong condition for synonymy, or some heteronymous expression might be thus interchangeable. We should not have understand synonymy in the sense of complete identity in psychological associations. We are concerned only with what may be called cognitive synonymy. Of course, to some extent, we have understood what cognitive synonymy is in the process of discussing analyticity. Assuming analyticity, we can explain cognitive synonymy of terms as follows: to say that bachelors and unmarried men are cognitively synonymous is to say no more or no more nor less than the statements. All and only bachelors are unmarried men is analytic. The question before us is whether such interchangeability is sufficient conditions for cognitive synonymy. Immediately, it may appear to be positive by examples of the following sort. The statement, necessarily all and only bachelors are bachelors, is logically true. Then if bachelor and unmarried men are interchangeable, then the results, necessarily all and only bachelors and unmarried men will also be logically true. Hence, bachelor and unmarried men are cognitively synonymous. But in this argument, we use the adverb necessarily. It makes the above two statement true. Quine points out that the use of this adverb does not make the statement analytic. Rather, our prior sense of analytic enables us to use the adverb in case of analytic statements. We have to prove analyticity by cognitive synonymy. In the above argument, prior sense of analyticity proves cognitive synonymy. So we are committing the fallacy of circular argument here. As such, in predicate calculus, we use a type of language which is extensional. Two predicates, when agree extensionally, are true of the same object. Then we may say that there is an interchangeability between the two. But Quine points out that in an extension language, interchangeability is no assurance of cognitive synonymy. We have already discussed earlier that creature with a head or creature with kidney have extension agreement, but they differ in meaning. Likewise, bachelor and unmarried man might have interchangeability on the basis of extensional arguments, but this does not guarantee their meaning to be same. Hence, there is no cognitive synonymy. As such, interchangeability is not a sufficient condition for analyticity. Quine then goes on to discuss analyticity. The approach of interchangeability to define analyticity is wrong.
Sorry, Niranjan Babu.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am going to conclusion part.
Okay.
Due to the scarcity of time, I am now going to the conclusion part. Some thinkers presuppose that after Quine's dogma of analytic synthetic distinctions, a threat arises for Kant's notion of synthetic apparent judgments. Their argument was if analytic-synthetic distinction was blurred, then the synthetic approach judgment of Kant would lose its status. I would like to point out that synthetic approach judgment of Kant is not affected by blurring of analytic-synthetic distinctions. Quine is criticizing the distinction between analytic and synonymy. He proves that neither by definitions, nor by interchangeability, nor by semantic rules. The analyticity of an analyst, he proved that neither by definition, nor by interchangeability, nor by semantic rules, the analyticity of an analytic statement can be established. So on the basis of that, to say that analytic synthetic distinction is dogma is also questionable. Kant's notion of synthetic a priori has different perspectives. It is purely from the cognitive point of view. Kant has identified such judgment to be basis of her knowledge of the external world. Quine's analysis of words and their synonyms is derived from linguistic points of view. So in my opinions, Quine's dogma of analytic synthetic distinctions does not tarnish the status of Kant's synthetic approach judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Behra. Actually, in the chat box, Mona Lisa Das asked me a question to Niranjan Behra. What are the basic difference between synonymy and cognitive synonymy? Is they same or different? So it's open for discussion. It's a famous paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. Perhaps Niranjan Behra is more sympathetic towards Immanuel Kant. So,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Behra,
yes, sir.
please respond to the question of Mona Lisa Das in the chat box.
Basically, cognitive synonymy is a type of synonymy in which the synonyms are also similar in meaning. And yes, cognitive synonymy is a type of synonym in which synonyms are similar in meaning, and that cannot be differentiated either denotatively or connotatively.
Yes. Mona Lisa Das. The second question, Swagatika Das. What is explication according to Carnap?
Basically, Carnap, by explications, Carnap means to replace in inexact concept to exact concept, which is not clear enough to be used in scientific context. Carnap never uses the explication to introduce synonymic expressions. In various contexts, the explicandum cannot always replaced by the explicatum. So the Quine objection does not applicable to Carnap concept of analyticity.
Okay. Sir, Ganesh sir.
What is that?
Sir, please enter into the discussion.
No, please go on.
Sir, anybody, if interested, please open your audio and ask question to Niranjan Behra. Now, we proceed to our third participant, Mr. Kanhu Charan Sahu, research scholar, PG Department of Philosophy, Utkal University. He is going to McIntyre's view, notion of the self.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you are.
Thank you, sir. Esteemed my all teachers, and esteemed chairperson of this section, and my seniors and juniors. Actually, sir, my topic is a social moral aspect. But after publishing the list, I contact to Lakshman sir. She told me that you have to adjust because due to lack of time, I put you in social moral aspect, logic and metaphysics section. Um, I am going to present my paper on Mercator's notion of a self as abstract. The concept of self is one of the philosophical issues among all the philosophical issues. Various theories have been advanced in different areas of philosophy like metaphysics, philosophy of mind, and socio-moral philosophy. The aim and objective of this paper are to discuss only the social moral aspect of self with special reference to McIntyre. This paper also outlines that McIntyre's notion of self is a social embodied which remains a unique interpretation and differs from enlightenment and post-enlightenment account of the self. Apart from this paper also declares that McIntyre's view on the notion of a self is a dependent rational animal and needs a society to fulfill the telos. Therefore, the self can be characterized as a social practice being and as a narrative unit. Come to introduction. The problem of a self is addressed in different areas of philosophy like metaphysics, philosophy of mind, and also in social moral philosophy. Metaphysics addresses philosophical problems regarding the concept of self, such as does self exist or not? What is the cause of self? How does one realize the self? Philosophy of mind also stands with the same problem, like whether the self is a conscious or not. How does self interact with body? What are the attributes of a self? Social moral philosophy also deals with the same problem in social moral context. It asks questions like whether the self is a social embodied or not. What are the characteristics of a self in social moral aspects? What is the role of a self in a community or society? Does self enjoy the freedom in society? Is society necessary for self? Let us discuss the third part, which is the social moral aspect of the self that has been advanced by different prominent social moral philosophers like Michael Wazeler, Michael Sandel, and Alceder McIntyre. Among them, Alceder McIntyre is one of the critical thinkers of Western moral philosophy. His understanding of self is neither in the sense of metaphysics nor in the sense of philosophy of mind, rather in terms of socio-moral sense. He narrates, he narrates that self means individual being in a social context. Out of society, self cannot be imagined. McIntyre has found that there is a wrong interpretation of a notion of the self in the period of enlightenment and post-enlightenment. So he vehemently criticizes these two traditions. The leading thinkers of these traditions are David Hume, Immanuel Kant, and Søren Kierkegaard, and also Friedrich Nietzsche. Because these traditions have represented individual-centric view, the self out of society, which is impossible, as he finds from the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment account of the self is an individual and physical, perceptual, psychological, continuous, rational, and autonomous subject. But for McIntyre, self is not an only individual. Rather, it is a social individual dependent being that has an inherent complexity, which is the individual point of view is incapable to visualize. As a communitarian, McIntyre believes that in a community or society where one must find the self that is the social embodied. In this context, his view is opposed to John liberal philosophy, which claims that each individual has the capacity to do and what to not do, and each has sufficient understanding to defend themselves. But unlike liberalism, McIntyre thinks that individuals are unable to think about what is good or bad, rather they learn from its society or community. He believes that the development of an individual depends upon community. A society or community provides all the opportunity to develop the individual character to be an ideal being or to be a virtuous being. Self is a virtuous being when he practices different moral norms of his community or society. McIntyre's notion of self can be characterized in the following lines. The first character is self is a social practice being. McIntyre defines that self as a social being who practices social norms to achieve the certain goals or telos. Social practices are necessary for the self to be a virtuous being in any sector of society. He narrates definition of practice in his work After Virtue as follows. I quote, any coherent and complex form of social established cooperative human activity through which the goods internal to that form of activity are realized in the course of trying to achieve those standards of excellence which are appropriate to the and partially definitive of the form of activity, with the result that human power to achieve excellence and human conception of the ends and goals involved are systematically extended. Unquote. In other words, practice is a human activity because it takes a human being or self to act rationally and work towards goal. Practice makes human being or self a virtuous being, and virtuous being or self constantly aim at internal goods or more than external goods. To achieve internal goods, some major external ones are required. Without them, practice would not survive over time. McIntyre added four adjectives in this concept of practice: cooperative, socially established, complex, and coherent. He defines practice refers to human activity. The guidance is cooperative. Self as a moral agent is held by the people who are already virtuous. The cooperative activity is a social established and social permitted. The practice is not established but by the community of society. Because within practice, one is born and sustained and makes a relationship and feels the social rules, follows the social rules. Social cooperative activity is a complex. It's relative to the relation embodied and historical and unique. So practice is a background for the self to be a virtuous being. Virtue is a defined set of practice. The set of practice sustained within a tradition. The tradition themselves shaped by transmitted and run through the practice, which themselves have a history. According to McIntyre, human being or self is the preliminary stage of animality and dependence. That is why he thought that self or human being needs virtue that will be applicable in a society or flourish in a society. Subsequently, the self or human being becomes an independent practical reasoner. An independent practical reasoner, he makes transaction from accepting what we are taught by the earliest teacher to make our judgment about books. The transaction has three characteristic features. Firstly, the self is able to evaluate or modify the reject or one's practical judgment. Secondly, self must be movement from awareness on the present to an awareness informed by the some degree of shared understanding of present and future possibility. Thirdly, there must be a movement from judgment on the in real. Second character is self as a narrative unit. Self or human being, according to McIntyre, can be understood in narrative form. He defines that human being as a storytelling animal. All life is unified, narrative embodied in several other narratives. For instance, an individual self as a member of an interrelated institution like family, city, professions, and different organizations and religion. It says that an intelligible action depends upon narrative or story that provide a better explanation of our inner life. The story is something that gives an information about human beings. From birth to academic McIntyre, from birth to death, human life is full of story. If you wants to know what is the self or a human being, that can be defined in the form of story or narrative. The story is full of social events. And the self or human being lives in a story that gives identity to the self human being. He or she belongs to that community or society. In a community or society, there are different social professional organizations where self or human being gets an identity as a doctor, as a teacher, or any other professions. So all the social organizations have a particular story that one has to understand, that one has to understand to be a part of the story of any organization. To be a well-being or a human being or self have to be virtuous being and extend his moral excellence. As a result, the self cannot make a new story as a virtuous being. So in this sense, McIntyre views that man is a storytelling animal. According to McIntyre, narrative is a constituent of a human being and embodied in his very nature. Human action is views and the totality, the structure of a narrative. An incredible action of a human being depends upon the story, because story regulates human action, whether one ought to do or not to do. that can be done according to social story. McIntyre claims that the interpretation of a self or human being is not only the actor of the story but the author. With his free action, human being creates the narrative or life story. As McIntyre believes that in virtue ethics, he says that human being goes through different situations. According to situation, he can create a new story as per his being. He also
Sorry,
point out that
sorry, Mr. Rao, please, concluding point.
Uh, it is clear from the above that McIntyre provides a communitarian or socio-moral model of self, which is a social embodied and cared and nurtured by a community society. In order to make his argument as strong against enlightenment and post-enlightenment accounts of notion of self, he formulates different social elements and characterize self as practice being and narrative unit, which makes self as a virtuous being to attempt internal goods or tell us and encounter different virtue and extended humanity in the community or society.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sao. Your paper is based on McIntyre's notion of self. This self is socially embodied, and his view on the notion of self is dependent. Being and needs a society to fulfill the telos. Therefore, self can be characterized as a social practice, being as a narrative unity. So thank you very much. It is open for discussion.
There are questions in the chat box.
Sachin Babu given a question. What is the importance of having self in philosophy? Mr. Shao,
Okay, sir.
you response.
I try to respond to Sachin Babu. And McIntyre perception of first of all, McIntyre is the socio-moral philosopher and deals with social moral problems. Very beginning, I have mentioned that whether self is a social embodied or not, this is a socio-moral problems. It is about try to handle. I have mentioned very beginning my introduction part that is whether self is a social embodied or not. That is the character of self. So you have to understand the social moral aspect of self. Another aspect is for McIntyre, self is a moral being. We know that moral philosophy is a branch of philosophy. The need to discuss about the moral conflict or dilemma. So in that context, McIntyre perception of self is a socio-moral embodied being, self as a social moral being. Hence, there's a need to discuss in order to bring out to clarify the concept of notion of a self from the aspect of McIntyre. So there's a need of a philosophical discussion to discuss how McIntyre understand, how McIntyre present the notion of a self.
Another question. It is Sodno Prabha Sahu. She asks you that what is the basic difference between the self and the soul?
A soul is something that McIntyre takes self in the social moral aspect. If you are talking soul, that is a metaphysical aspect. But I am not dealing with the soul, but dealing in McIntyre perspective, self is a social embodied. I have mentioned that McIntyre does not talk. Self means in the sense of metaphysics or in the sense of mind, but he just focused this paper only to social moral aspect.
Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Sir,
Namaskar. Kanucharan has presented very nicely McIntyre's version of social self. Now I just want to ask him one question. That do you think that the question of personal identity, McIntyre subscribes to the notion of personal identity or the question of person specifically as found in Strawson?
Sir, I am not comparing with the Strawson theory, but McIntyre has written personal identity in terms of narrative. Whenever we have to give an identity as a personal identity, I have to define narrative form. As I said, I am
No,
not doing it.
that's there. The narrative, personal identity from the standpoint of narrative is all right, but you will be also find this that he subscribes to the Strawson's notion of person because it is from others to myself. That is what he is suggesting. That means as the others exist, through others I can affirm my own existence. So this is also a Strawsonian concept of person that we find in McIntyre's version. You try to brood over that and person and personal identity in McIntyre. Thank you. Nicely presented. Okay.
Sectional President, sir.
Sir,
Sectional President, sir. What is this social self after all? Does my biodata constitute my social self?
sir.
Does my biodata,
Second, sir.
which is available publicly, constitute my social self? Kanu, did you listen to my question?
Yes, yes, sir.
I think, sir, about more about I question, sir.
Oh, okay.
Exactly, sir.
So there are another 4 questions, sir. So Ulugulan. So what is your name? Good name. If you present, then open your audio and ask a question. How do you explain a relationship between self and the society? And K.M. Narayan Rao is also asking, does McIntyre believe that as long as the goal in life is not clear, the capacity to solve conflicts of values become difficult? Then Professor Bibhu Prasna Patra, sir, if you present, you open your audio and ask questions, sir. Dipali Rao.
I was just asking that how is it different from McIntyre's view, the Socratic notion of the self? Because you talk about the virtuous moral agent. How is it different from the Socratic notion?
Socratic notion of self. So I just focus on McIntyre view that virtue. When I'm talking about virtue, and virtue is need for human being. And book he has a book a book he has written by McIntyre that is a dependent rational being. Why human being need virtue? And in a society, there are different peoples. There are different communities. And the we in order to fulfill the human telos, our goals, so we have to cooperate each other. So far as we need virtue, charity, justice, helping, all these things, because we all are not capable at all aspects. There are different. We are actually disability. So in order to fulfill our telos, in order to cooperatively achieve something, so we need virtue. So McIntyre, virtue is necessary for society.
That is also true for Socrates.
Okay.
Yes,
That
Mr.
is also true for
Sahu,
Socrates.
you go to the chat box and try to complete it in a very brief answer. K.M. Narayan Rao, Dipali Raut, questions. K.M. Narayan Rao's question is, does McIntyre believe that as long as the goal in life is not clear, the capacity to solve conflicts of values becomes difficult?
Okay. I want to directly contact with sir.
Okay, okay.
Sir, Imran sir.
Dipali Rao?
Actually, Actually, Kanhucharan has not discussed about that, whether the values they belong to society and it is in their from their interpersonal relationship, man
Yes,
imbibes the
yes.
value that he has not referred to that. Professor, I mean, Dr. Om Naran Rao is referring to that. Okay,
Okay,
so
okay. Thank you,
from
sir.
our social self, as Professor Das, Professor G.P. Das was also raising this question, what actually is meant by a social self? Does it exist as we exist? So that is again a very long discussion, and the time will not permit for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, okay, sir. Sir, directly we are inviting our next
Yeah,
participant,
please
sir.
stop the mobile. Please stop the mobile coming from some other connection.
Sir, sir. Sorry, sir. Uh, Miss Rukmoni Das.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a research scholar, PG Department of Philosophy, Utkal University. Its topic is concept of knowledge, perspective of Ramanuja.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Namaskar to
Start.
all. As we are already late, myself Rukman Das. I'm a research scholar from PG Department of Philosophy, Utkal University, and my topic is the concept of knowledge, perspective of Ramanuja. So first of all, I would like to thanks everyone at least to give me a chance to present a paper, and though I are already late, so I will try to summarize my paper as soon as possible so that other participants will get a chance to present their paper. So, as I said that my paper is on the concept of knowledge, perspective of Ramanuja. So, as we know, Acharya Ramanuja has presented the Visishtadvaita system, Visishtadvaita school of Vedanta, which is one of the sub school of Vedanta, like Advaita of Acharya Sankara or Dvaita Vada of Acharya Madhas. In this way, his philosophy is known as Visishta Dvaita Vada or qualified monism. But here, my main concern is with the concept of knowledge. So, perspective of knowledge is very important in each and every system. In which is deals with the epistemic aspect of philosophy, as it is said that epistemology is the doorway to philosophy. Because it is only through the knowledge factor is very important, and it is only through this that we can know about everything else. So in Indian context, the word Jnana stands for both true cognition of valid knowledge and invalid knowledge. That is the reason why the word Brahma refers to stands for the valid knowledge, and the term Aprama stands for invalid knowledge. When we talk about valid knowledge refers is defined as the apprehension of right apprehension of object. It what we can say it correspond valid knowledge corresponds to the object. On the other side, invalid knowledge, which is called as Aprama. Apart from this, there are also some dictionary definitions of the term knowledge, like it is the fact of knowing or information, or what can be not, what can be known. Sorry, what is known? The When we talk about the knowledge, the concept knowledge is used by teachers, educators, policymakers. It refers to the body of information what teachers teach and students are expected to learn. But as we said, my concern is only with the Indian context. So there is a aphorism that sa vidya ja vimukta. That means that is knowledge which leads to liberation. But as I said, my only focus is on the Ramanuja's perspectives of knowledge. So without wasting more time, I will go through this. Uh, in Visishtadvaita Bhada Acharya Ramanuja, the knowledge factor plays a very pivotal role. It asserts that we can know things as they are. For Ramanuja, there are three valid sources of knowledge like perception, inference, and verbal testimony. As per Visishta Dvaita system, when we talk about knowledge or jnana, it starts from the self or the soul. With the mind and sense organs, it comes into contact with the object. It is it is belongs to and exists for the self. It is called as dharma bhuta jnana or attributed knowledge. As he holds that it can be both substance and attribute. It is substance in the sense it has the attribute of contraction and expansion, and as an attribute it belongs to the self. But here one important point is to note that though it belongs to the self, but it is not identical with the self. Here is a distinction between self and the knowledge. When we talk about the knowledge, no doubt it is self-luminous because it can reveal itself and its object. But on the other side, when we talk about the soul, it is both self-luminous and self-conscious, because consciousness is the essence of the soul. They both means knowledge and soul, they are separate but not separable. But as Ramanuja has stated, discrimination is essential to all knowledge. He gives more emphasis to the notion that identity is qualified by difference. That means knowledge is always in and through difference. And the similar kind of notion found in Hegel's philosophy. As we know, identity in difference is the key concept in Hegel's philosophy. As, um, as per his view, being is pure nothing. That means when you talk about being, it is more abstract. It is devoid of all attribute, and they being and non-being, they are opposed and yet identical. They are opposed in the sense both are two contradictory terms, but they are identical in the sense non-being is deduced from the being, and it cannot be deduced from the being if it could not have been it could not have been there in it implicitly. So that's how the Hegel's and Ramanuja's view somehow matches. And lastly, I would like to say that when you talk about the Dharmabhuta Jnana or attribute knowledge in context of Acharya Ramanuja, it is self-luminous and it reveals its object, and the relation between self and knowledge can be betterly understood by an example like the relationship between a lamp and light. Self is like a lamp, and knowledge is like its light. Light constitutes the essence of the lamp. They cannot be separate. They are separate, no doubt, but you can say they're separable. And with regard to the concept of knowledge, Acharya Ramanuja holds the view that intrinsic validity of knowledge, and the knowledge which I talk about is the immediate cause of liberation, as he identifies the highest bhakti with jnana, and he advocates the theory of jnana karma samuchaya vada. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rukmani Das. So actually, she concentrated on concept of knowledge of Ramanuja. She's open for discussion.
ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ କଥା ବୁଝିପାରିଲିନି ରୁକ୍ମିଣୀ, ଧର୍ମଭୂତ ଜ୍ଞାନଟା କଣ?
Sir, Dharmabhuta Jnana means the attributive knowledge. It means when you talk about knowledge, it belongs to the self as an attribute. And when you talk about knowledge, knowledge is can be both substance and attribute. As a substance, it has both the quality of contraction and expansion, but as an attribute, it belongs to the self and exists for the
ସାମାନ୍ୟ କଣ? ଫିଲୋସଫିକ୍ ଟର୍ମରେ କହିଲେ କଣ ବୁଝିବା?
when you talk about knowledge, it is an
ଏପିଷ୍ଟେମୋଲୋଜି ଯାହା ଡିସ୍କସନ୍ ହଉଛି, ଏପିଷ୍ଟେମୋଲୋଜି ଯେମିତି ଡିସ୍କସନ୍ ହଉଛି, ସେଇଭଳି ଟର୍ମ ୟୁଜ୍ କରି କହିଲେ କଣ କରିବା?
Yes, sir.
ଫିଲୋସଫିକ୍ ଟର୍ମ ବା ଏପିଷ୍ଟେମୋଲୋଜିକାଲ ଟର୍ମରେ ଡିସ୍କସନ୍ କଲେ ସେଟା କ'ଣ କହିବା? ସେ କହିଦେଲେ ତା ଭିତରେ ଅଛି। ଭିତରେ ଅଛି ମାନେ କ'ଣ?
Inherent in so it is inherently within the soul. That it belongs to the soul and exists for.
Does he mean to say that there are innate ideas, innate principles like this?
No. No, sir. It actually it start knowledge when we talk about it starts from the cell, and with the mind and the sense organs, it comes into contact with the object and assumes its form and reveals it.
Self and consciousness को तफात करी हबो?
As the consciousness is the very essence of the self.
Can they be separated or can they only be distinguished?
Yes, sir. We can distinguish but cannot separate.
Achha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, what is the source of knowledge? Hello.
Yes.
What is the source of knowledge according to Ramanuja?
Sir, actually, Ramanuja has accepted three sources of valid knowledge. One is perception, another is inference, and third is verbal testimony.
Yes, you should highlight on that. That is because we are discussing about epistemology.
Limited
yes.
Summarize it.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Yes. Could you please tell me that the difference between Advaita theory of perception and Ramanuja's concept of perception? That is my first question. And since you brought out the relationship between the Hegelian notion of theory of knowledge with equating Ramanuj, which is a very difficult task, but you are trying to do it because one is idealistic school and one is a realistic school. So how do you differentiate these two? And the identity which you are talking about is not very clear. That what kind of identity you are talking about? Is it a kind of the identity where we talk about in Sankhya philosophy, the Satkaryavada theory, that the effect pre-exists in the cause or something like that? So it's not very clear the concept of knowledge which you are trying to bring out in Ramanuja's philosophy. So could you please highlight? And self is either you are talking about, because when we talk about the Indian theory of knowledge, so we basically bring into two models into account. One is Sota Pramanyavad model and one is Parata Pramanyavad model. Intrinsic validity of knowledge and extrinsic validity of knowledge. So which model the Ramanuja is following? That's my question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, madam, for your nice observation and suggestion. So actually, due to constraint of time, we are not going to details. So paper presenter, keep it in mind and develop your paper.
Yes, ma'am. Can I answer now or I will respond later?
Okay, very briefly response madam's question.
Yes. First of all, Ramanuja in the favor of Sutah Pramanyavada, intrinsic validity of knowledge. Then when we talk about identity and difference, in the point of view of Ramanuja, even when we talk about the Brahman, it is not a distinctless unity. It is qualified by difference. It has two parts like Chit and Achit, which is its part. Means both are belongs to it as an attribute, but if we see the Acharya Shankara's philosophy, he is talk about the identity, and rest part is what ma'am has told me that Hegel's philosophy. I am not comparing the notion of knowledge of Acharya Ramanuja to the concept of knowledge of Hegel. I am just bring the notion of identity in difference. What Hegel has pointed out that as when we talk about being and non-being, both are opposed, no doubt, but still they are identical in the sense that non-being is deduced from the being, and it could not have been deduced from the being unless it is means already it is there in it, at least implicitly. That's how it is it is said that identity in difference. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now I am inviting our next participant. She is a student of Bikram Dev Autonomous College in Jaipur. Susri Sonali Das.
Susri Shalini Das.
Susri Sonali Das. Nine theory of perception. She's a student of Bikram Dev Autonomous College. Without any delay, Das, you please start.
Good afternoon to all my respected sir and students. This is Susri Saloni Das, +3 second year student, VD College, Jaipur. I am going to present the project on.
You open your video also.
Sir, कालिठू हमरो टी current नाही आउ network problem भी बहुत अच्छे थी.
Okay. Let's go on. Let's go on.
Okay. I'm going to present the project on the narrow theory of perception. Let's discuss about the narrow theory of perception. Says Gautama was the founder or father of Nyaya system. This system is also known as Tarkasastra or Vada Vidya. All Indian philosophical systems accept the perception as the valid source of knowledge and the primary stage of knowledge. Nyaya system admits there are 4 valid sources of knowledge such as Pratyaksha means perception, Anumana means inference, Upanaya means comparison, and lastly Sabda means verbal testimony. In this 4 valid source of knowledge, now I discuss about perception means Pratyaksha. Perception has a pramana is a direct source of knowledge because it inquire knowledge through direct sense object contact. There are 4 types of attributes such as object, sense organ, mind, and soul or self. When object come into the contact with sense organ, and sense organ comes into the contact with mind, and lastly mind contact with the self or soul. For example, a tree is green before me, but I know that when I have a perception, when my sense organ come into contact with the tree, the contact with tree and sense organ is possible when mind comes into the contact with sense organ, and this is possible under the direction of soul or self. Perception has 3 stages. One is determinate, means sabikalpa, and second is indeterminate, means nibirkalpa, and lastly recognition, means prativigna. Let's discuss about the determinate perception. In determinate perception, we know an object with its attributes. For example, when we see a object like borewell in a center, we know all attributes of the borewell. This is clear. In this stage, we are all clear that perception of the borewell. Second is indeterminate perception. In a indeterminate stage, we know a object without its attributes. In this stage, we are not clearly of an object. This stage with primary stage of perception, and that is called indeterminate perception. For example, in a sunlight day, you enter in a cinema hall and firstly you never seen how many peoples are there and how many chairs are there. That is the example of indeterminate perception. According to Naya, there are two types of perception, namely ordinary perception and extraordinary perception. In ordinary perception, we have a knowledge by the help of our five sense organ: eyes, nose, ear, tongue, and skin. Um, and the sixth sense organ, that is mind. When our internal sense organ comes into the contact with an object, that is called internal perception, and internal perception has a part of ordinary perception. Ordinary perception again divided into two types: internal perception and external perception. Mm, Internal perception further divided into five types, such as tactual, visual, auditory, gustatory, and olfactory. Uh, with this, lastly, we, in this above discussion above in this above discussion, we clear that there are four valid sources of knowledge: perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. With this, I would like to give break to Tom. Have a good day to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susri Saloni Das. Actually, in the chat box, Rukmoni is saying something, perhaps as per Visishta Advaita system of Acharya Ramanuja, knowledge starts from the self. With mind and the sense organs, it comes into contact with the object, assumes its form, and thus reveals it. So,
Sir, actually, I am responding to the question what has been said before.
okay.
I guess.
Oh, it is not question for Saloni. Okay.
Saloni's present paper, what exactly the definition of perception according to the Nyaya philosophers? Saloni? How do the Nayakas define perception? How do the Nayakas define perception?
Sir, ଆମର ଯୋଉ ପାଞ୍ଚଟା ସେନ୍ସ ଅର୍ଗାନ ରହିଲା, ଯୋଉ ଫାଇଭ ସେନ୍ସ ଅର୍ଗାନ ଦ୍ୱାରା ଆମେ ଯୋଉ ନଲେଜଟା ଗେନ୍ କରିଥାଉ, ପରସିଭ୍ କରିଥାଉ, ତାହାକୁ ହିଁ ଆମେ କହିବାକୁ ଗଲେ ପରସେପସନ କହିଥାଉ।
What about ମାନସ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟକ୍ଷ? ନାଇଁ ସେ ସଂସ୍କୃତରେ କେମିତି ଡିଫାଇନ୍, ସେ ସଂସ୍କୃତ ଫ୍ରେଜଟା କେମିତି ଡେଫିନେସନଟା କୁହାଯାଇଛି? ପ୍ରତ୍ୟକ୍ଷ ଜ୍ଞାନଟାକୁ କିପରି ଡିଫାଇନ୍ କରାଯାଇଛି?
Perception through the mind.
Oh, there are other questions in the chat box, please.
Meenakshi Sethi, if a person have jaundice, he or she can see a white.
कहाँ टेलीफोन की कथा ये?
See a white conch as yellow, then what kind of a perception is this? Saloni?
Yes, sir.
try to respond the question.
এটা কোন রাইট পারসেপশন হবে না রং পারসেপশন হবে না কোন হবে কোন?
Sir, she has described three kinds of perception: determinate, indeterminate, and recognition, which is called as pratyabhigya. Then my question is, which kind of perception? Is it determinate, or is it indeterminate, or the third kind?
রাইট পারসেপশন হেলে সিনা এই ডিভিজনে পড়িব, যদি রং পারসেপশন হইতো এই ডিভিজন কেমন পড়িব?
Agya, sir.
Yes. Jayanti madam, please open your audio and ask questions.
No, I don't have any question. She is actually says whatever she has done according to the text. So there is nothing to, and perception is a kind of, it's a realistic school, and indriya artha sannikarsa utpannam jnanam pratyaksha jnanam. So there is a kind of parata pramanya model is taken care of by Nyaya philosophers. So perception is a kind of first mind and sense organs, and then the self is coming into account. So that's what I have to say. It's fine with that perception analysis.
Okay, thank you for your observation. Ranjit sir.
Yes, it is. Naya definition on perception is mostly a logical definition and not a psychological one. Indriyartha sannikorshotpanam jnanam abhyapadeshyam abhyavichari vyavasayatmakam pratyaksham. So all these things, these are all logical. The characteristics given in the perception in Naya Sutra, they are all logical because Naya is trying to give a realistic model. So nothing psychological is there. So that is why the problem with pratyabhigya, as Minakshi has mentioned, so that creates a little bit problem for us. But still, the Naya system, the definition given is a logical one and no psychological trace is in it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now we are inviting our next participant, Horoprasad Sahu, student, Bikram Dev Autonomous College, Jaipur. His paper is title of the paper is Synthetic A Priori.
Sir, he is not able to join due to network problem because current is no.
Okay, then I just invite Miss Priyambada Rana, a research scholar, Ravensha University, Cuttack. Her paper, the title of the paper, An Analysis of Frege Theory of Sense. Priyambada, are you present here? Perhaps no. Without any delay, I'm just requesting next participant, Mohima Sagar Mollik. Are you present? Research scholar, GM University, Sambalpur. Mohima Sagar Mollik. Next, Miss Ranjita Mudli, student, UN Autonomous College of Science and Technology, Odishpur, Cuttack. Are you present? Ranjita?
Yes, sir, I am present.
Yeah, thank you. Start your paper. Your title of the paper is Concept of Vidya and Avidya, a special reference of Ishopanishad.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special APO. I am Ranjita Muduli for Mudenath Autonomous College of Science and Technology, Oraspur, Kotak, having in Philosophy Honours. I am going to present a topic on concept of Vidya and Avidya, a special reference of Isavasya Upanishad. First of all, I am discuss now the Upanishad, the concept of Vidya and Avidya. Then I will discuss the concept of Vidya and Avidya, a special reference of Isavasya Upanishad. The word Vidya is derived from the Sanskrit root vid, which means to know, to perceive, to see, and to understand. Vidya means knowledge, jnana. Here, Vidya refers to the knowledge of the reality. Vidya consists the knowledge of transcendental self. Vidya consists in knowing the world to be empirically real and absolute to be transcendentally real. Vidya is not merely knowing something, it is the realization of the ultimate reality. Avidya is a Sanskrit word whose literary meaning is ignorance, misconceptions, misunderstanding, incorrect knowledge, and it is the opposite of Vidya. Avidya is mentioned in the Upanishads as the source of delusion. Avidya means cannot be absence of knowledge or ignorance. Avidya refers to the knowledge of the empirical world. The knowledge of temporal world is also known as avidya. Avidya is not merely negative; it is positive, and its result is positive. In Isha Upanishad defines through Avidya is not completely useless. Avidya is involved in the human activities. Avidya constitutes the knowledge of individual self. Avidya is sometimes confused with Maya. But one must be very clear that Avidya is not Maya, because Avidya is conceived as the individual ignorance, whereas Maya has been conceived as cosmic ignorance or universal ignorance. The Upanishadic concept of Vidya and Avidya aims at the distinction between transcendental self and the individual self. We have already discussed now the Vidya constitutes the knowledge of transcendental self and Avidya constitutes the knowledge of individual self. There is no difference between the two selves, but their functions are differently. According to Mundaka Upanishad, the two selves are described as two birds, and it is said that two birds are companions united crying to the same tree. Of these two are one is the sweet fruit and the looks on waiting. One is enjoyer or the empirical self, and the another is transcendental Atman. Avidya is the knowledge of the appearance only, beyond empirical and temporal world of multiplicity. There is the ultimate reality, which is transcendental one. Acharya Shankara says that Vidyam cha avidyam devata jnanam karma cheti artha. That means Shankara interpretation Vidya to refer to the knowledge of the God, Devata, and Avidya is involved in the human activities. But one thing remains unaffected, that Vidya and Avidya both are equally important for the knowledge of ultimate reality. Because it is taken for granted that the ultimate reality cannot be realized by means of even in the absence of it. Knowledge and ignorance refers to the different nebula, and both are equally important for the attainment of the ultimate knowledge. Now, I will discuss the concept of Vidya and Avidya, a special reference of Isavasya Upanishad. Isavasya Upanishad is the part of Shukla Yajurveda. Isha or Isavasya Upanishad derives its name from the first word of the first verse of the same Upanishad. The word Isha means Lord of the universe. Isha Upanishad is an Upanishad of Ishara or Isha, the Lord of creation and the source of all. The Isha or Isavasya Upanishad proclaims loudly the philosophy of non-dualism or Advaita, the declaring God or Brahman to be the sole inhabitant of everything that exists. It has similarities with the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. For example, the Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters and the Isvarasya Upanishad has 18 verses. In many ways, the 18 verses are significant as the 18 chapters. Now, I am discuss the ninth verse of Isvarasya Upanishad, or knowledge and ignorance. The ninth invocation says that Andaha tama pravishanti je vidyamu pasyate tato bhuyam ibate tama yau vidyam rataha. Andam tamaha, blinding darkness. Pasyanti, enter into. Jo avidyam upasyate, those who worship ignorance. Bhuyu ibate tamaha, that darkness is greater. You vidyam rataha, those who are engaged with knowledge. Je avidyam upasyate, ते अंधतम प्रविशन्ति परंतु जे विद्यम रताः ते ततः भूयम् अंधतम प्रविशन्ति. Both are the contrary to essence. That means in the blinding darkness enter those who worship ignorance, and those who delight in knowledge enter into still greater darkness as it were. This verse appears to be ambiguous. It is here that those who seek for knowledge gets enlightened, and those who remains away from the path of knowledge get themselves into darkness. It is also here that knowledge, vidya, liberated, and ignorance of vidya blinds. Vidya enhances the divinity within man, and avidya involves in divine. Vidya is compared to light which illuminates and let other to illuminate. But avidya is compared to darkness in which everything looks equal. Vidya teaches on to find out the discrimination, Veda, whereas avidya teaches one to find out nothing. Vidya makes one's life active and meaningful, but avidya makes inactive and meaningless. Vidya enables one's perception to be holistic, whereas avidya refers to be partial. But in this Upanishad, the definition of vidya and avidya given have it differently. Avidya is the path of action, karma, marga, and vidya is considered as the path of knowledge, jnana marga. Scholars are of the view that attain liberation, moksha, either to of action or the path of knowledge is sufficient to reach at the goal, because they are antagonistic to each other. One who adheres to the path of action inferior to those who adhere to path of knowledge. This verse says that one who travels through karma finds himself in darkness, and one who travels through the jnana finds himself still in greater darkness. That means each path is incomplete in itself. Action without karma is blind, and knowledge without karma is empty. Vidya is knowledge, and its realization is practical. Feel to know is to be, is the principle of life which makes it meaningful. Both are necessary for getting the highest virtues. Ramanuja advocates both the union of knowledge and action. Jnana karma samuchaya, Sanskrit term jnana karma samuchaya, is required to accomplish the goal. Kumarila also subscribed to this view as a bird cannot fly in the heaven by one wings, but one by both the wings. କୁମାରିକା କହିବା କଥା ଗୋଟେ ପକ୍ଷୀଟି ଆକାଶରେ କେବେ ଗୋଟେ ଡେଣାରେ ଉଡ଼ି ପାରିବେନି, ତା ପାଇଁ ବହୁତ ଡେଣା ଦରକାର। ସେହିପରି ଆମର ଆଟମ୍ ଲିବରେସନ ପାଇଁ ଆମର ବିଦ୍ୟା and ଅବିଦ୍ୟା both important our life. Similarly, liberation can be attained by combined pursuit of knowledge and works. Both theory and its practice makes man happy. Theory without practice makes one's life impractical, irrelevant, and useless. Similarly, action without knowledge makes one a machine. In other words, both of them are practical in their view. They fail to see the reality in full. Rather, they see it as a part. One see the whole reality when the theory is practiced. Isha Upanishad says, he who knows the two, Vidya and Avidya, crosses the death through ignorance and attain light internal through knowledge. Thank you. Now my presentation is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjita. And so your nice paper. Your paper is very much clear and it's audible to everyone. So it is open for discussion.
Ranjita. Hello, Ranjita, are you listening? Ranjita. पेपर फोपाड़ी पळेल ना कोन
ना ना सर नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम कटि जाउची रिजॉइन
अच्छा रिजॉइन सो यू बिलोंग टू फिलोसफी और टू संस्कृत व्हिच डिपार्टमेंट डू यू बिलोंग टू
फिलोसफी सर
फिलोसफी तो
अगेन सर
ठीक बर्तमान तीनटा कथा मोटे असुविधा अछि मते सुविधा कर दे
अगेन सर
गोटे कथा हैला ईशावास्य उपनिषद एवं श्रीमद् भगवत गीता ईशावास्य उपनिषद रे 18टी गद्य पद्य मिसिकरी अछि सेक्शन एवं भगवत गीता रे 18टी अध्याय अछि कोन यार गोटे श्लोक बा गोटे सेक्शन सहित तार गोटे अध्याय बुझे दैछि ना कोन
सर जेहेतु माने ईशावास्य उपनिषद गोटे माने उपनिषद रे गोटे प्रथम माने सेडा माने सिमिलरिटी रहिछि जेंति प्रथम उपनिषद
ईशावास्यम इदम सर्वम जहा कुआ गला से श्लोक रे सेटा कोन भगवत गीतार प्रथम अध्याय रे बुझी दैछि की
ना 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 सर भगवत गीता रे से बुझे जाय
किंतु why do you say that this has 18 and that has 18 also what is the point in it
so the first verse is that what is the role of human being तो ईशावास्य इदम सर्वम what is the role of human being का रोल कोन होबा दरकार कल्चर रे सेमिते गीता जहा गोटे अध्याय रे सिखै छै 18 वर्स सेंटी इंपोर्टेंट अछि तो माने कंपेयर करा जाय छी 18 वर्सेस सहित 18 चैप्टर्स
सप्तशती चंडी रे मते 700 श्लोक अछि गीता संगे ताकू सेम कंपेयर करिवा
no sir
when there is no point in bringing the two together if there is any point you can bring them together in respect of ontology in respect of the distinction between vidya and avidya that is all right but what is that number 18 to 18 there is no question of giving a parity of the two that is gone then the next point is je avidya re rahila se andhar re rahila जे विद्यार रहला से आहुरी अंधारे किमती रहला
सर अंधम तम प्रविशन्ति जे विद्यारे रहउची अविद्यारे रहउची कि माने कर्म मागे रहउची से त एक्चुअली अंधार जति आमे विद्यारे रही कि बट मो विद्याटा को मो माने रियलाइजेशन कहिबिनी सेति कि माने जण को मो ज्ञानटा अछि मो त को मो भीतर चापी देली से विद्यारे थाई कि मध्य अविद्यारे रहिले ना अंध तम प्रविशन्ति
ना सेटा बुझ पाबनी सेटा दैट इज नॉट अकॉर्डिंग टू टेक्स्ट सेटा तो चापी दवा था को चापी दवा था से श्लोक उदाहरण को तो
नहीं सर एक्चुअली श्लोक रे कहले ना अंध तमः प्रविशन्ति जे विद्वं पश्यते ततो भूयं इवते तम यो विद्यं रताः दैट मींस जे अविद्यम उपासते ते अंध तमः प्रविशन्ति जे विद्यं रताः ते भूयं इव तमः प्रविशन्ति जे अंध विद्या अविद्या रहउची से तो अंधार को जाउची किंतु बट जे विद्या रहउची ताठो अधिक अंधार को जाउची मान दैट मींस माने मो
केमिति हाउ
से सुनंतु माने मु माने ए जगत रे रहउची जदी मु माने के ज्ञान अछि बट मु से ज्ञान को यूटिलाइज करूनी ताले लोक माने माने से ज्ञान को जानि छी जण
से कथा से टेक्स्ट नाही भर्ती कर तू निजे से कथा से टेक्स्ट नाही
अला सॉरी
से चापी दउची ताको व्यवहार कर पारुनी ए कथा से पड़ची रहला से ता पर पॉइंट हैला जे विद्या अविद्या उभय केमिति दरकार मुक्ति पाई अविद्या दूर हेले सिना मोर मुक्ति हबो अविद्या विद्या ए गोटे एनालिसिस नै आसलु दीटा डेना नहले उड़िया कथा उड़ी कर तो मु कुआडे जाउ नै मु केवल मते ही रियलाइज करूची ना मुको तो उड़ी जाउ नै कुआडे मोर दीटा डेना दरकार हबो
आगे
से कोन दीटा कि दरकार होची अविद्या दूर हेले सिना विद्या हबो
सर एठी मो अलरेडी कहली ना
विद्या पर सुपर इंपोज हिच ना विद्याटा
ଆଜ୍ଞା
ଢାଙ୍କୁଣିଟା ଉଠିଲେ ଯାଇକିରି ହବ ନା।
Sir, ମୁଁ already
ସେମିତି
discuss କରିଛି ଅବିଦ୍ୟା is not merely absence of knowledge, its result is positive sometimes. So Kumarila says that the two
ଅବିଦ୍ୟାଟା ପଜିଟିଭ ବୋଲି କହୁଛି ଅନ୍ୟ ଅର୍ଥରେ। ଅବିଦ୍ୟା ଇଜ ନଟ୍ ଆବସେନ୍ସ ଅଫ ନଲେଜ। କଣ ସେଥିରେ କିଛି କିଛି ଅଛି? କୋଲାର ସୁନା ଖଣି ଯେମିତି ଆଉ ଖୋଳା ହଉନି କିନ୍ତୁ ତା ଦେହରେ କିଛି କିଛି ସୁନା ରହିଯାଇଛି, ସେମିତିଆ।
no sir.
Don't give yourself to just analogies. Oh, that's over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deepak Kumar Behera asks a question: are avidya and ignorance same? So it's also sir highlighted it.
Sir, no, ମାନେ different କଥା କି ଶଙ୍କର କହିଲେ ମାନେ ଅଲଗା, କିନ୍ତୁ ଉପନିଷଦ କୁହାଯାଇଛି ଯେ ମାନେ not different but ଅବିଦ୍ୟା sometimes means not ମାନେ absence of knowledge, ତ different.
Okay, thank you. Now we are
thank you
requesting Miss Shinara.
Hello.
Student. Hello.
Shall I respond, sir? Hello.
Okay, very briefly.
Very briefly. Thank you. Ranjita, you have you written this paper by yourself, or you should have basic understanding about the dimension of knowledge? You said that avidya and vidya both are necessary for the knowledge of the highest truth. How avidya contributes the understanding of the ultimate truth? The second thing is there are three dimensions: vidya, avidya, and aparavidya. So when we are talking about in English, we can say right knowledge, no knowledge, and wrong knowledge. So wrong knowledge is more dangerous than no knowledge. Suppose you don't know the address, that is better. But if you go on a wrong address, then you will face the problem. So we should not be misguided. Misguidance is bad. So greater darkness means we should not be misguided by aparavidya. That is said in the 9th verse of Isavas Upanishad. That the vidya means aparavidya. But the vidya itself, the knowledge by excellence, that gives us the right understanding of the ultimate truths. But you said that the avidya and the vidya both are necessary for understanding the ultimate. That I could not understand. Please clarify this, if you understand this, Ranjita.
No sir, no idea.
Okay. Mr. Das, actually we are one candidate remain, so you thank you for your observation. So we now invite Shinarani Naik, Bikramdev Autonomous College student. Shinarani Naik, are you present?
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
No present. Okay. So this is the end of the session of logic and metaphysics. Many paper presenters are there. Thanks for their.
Sinarani is there.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please present your paper.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar, ma'am. Good afternoon, all. Myself, Sinarani Nayak. I am the student of VD College, Jaipur. Honorable all professor, respected our HOD sir like Jewel, Dr. Lakshmana Patra, and respected all teacher. Thank you, my teacher, for giving me golden chance and to participate in your glorious meeting of AOPA. Now I want to meeting of AOP. And now I want to speak about my presentation, and my topic is Four Noble Truths of Buddha. Before going to topic, I want to start about Buddha. Firstly, I want to say Buddha Deva was prominent higher personality man. He was founder of Buddha Dharma. He was born at Lumbain. His parents' name was Suddhadana and mother's name is Mahamaya. Delivered the first ceremony and Saranath. Saranath is called Dharma Chakra Pravartana, or turning of the wheel of law. The school of Buddhism was established by Gautama Buddha. In the 6th century, the philosophy of Buddhism stands very high because of its ethic and social service rather than theology of very well known as the heterodox system of Indian philosophy. The ethical teaching of Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is the primary teaching of Buddhism. It is based in four truths such as the first noble truth says that human life is full of suffering, pain, evil, and sorrow. Pleasure and pain are two sides of same coin. Men suffer due to poverty, disgust, death, old age, and selfishness. The second noble truth tells regarding the cause of suffering. Every event must have a cause thing in the universe, must be cause and condition. Third noble truth says that regarding the causation of suffering. The Four Noble Truth provides the map for the causation of suffering. There is an ethical and spiritual path by following which are given below. Right view, right thought, right livelihood, right conduct, right effort, right mindfulness, etc. I kindly request I have a mistake, forgive me. Thank you all. Sir, ମୋ ଦେହ ବି ଖରାପ, ମୋ ମା 2 ଦିନ ହେଲା ମେଡିକାଲରେ ବି ଅଛନ୍ତି ନା, ମୁଁ ମେଡିକାଲରେ ଅଛି, ଭଲସେ ବି ପ୍ରିପେୟାର ହେଇନଥିଲି, ଏତିକି ମନେ ଥିଲା ସାର୍ ମୁଁ କହିଲି।
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
ଆସିଛ participate କରିଛ, ଏଇଟା খুব ଆନନ୍ଦର କଥା। Thank you very much. So this is the end of the 4th academic session, Logic and Metaphysics. Thanks to paper presenter and the distinguished scholars, those who are asked questions, given remarks, given observation. So thank you everybody for the discussion and interpretation. So thank you very much once again giving me an opportunity to participate in the valuable program of All Odisha Philosophy Association. Thank you everybody for their plenty of patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Jhadeswar Ghosh, for managing the session well and in time. Now over to Saurabh sir.
Okay, thank you, Jhadeswar, for conducting the session so well. Now, I request Lakshman to make an announcement when shall we meet next time and session.
Thank you, sir. The next session will start at 2:30.
2:30.
As per the time and program, it will start 2:30.
Sir, ମୁଁ ଟିକେ କହିବି କି ଏଠି just ଗୋଟେ ପଦେ ଖାଲି ଜର୍ନାଲ ବିଷୟରେ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଓପନ୍ ସେସନ ରେ ଯୋଉମାନେ ପେପର ପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟ କରିଛନ୍ତି, including those symposiasts and other those who are really serious about that their paper should be considered for journal publication, they should follow the guidelines of the journal. Minimum 3,000 words should be there, and the editorial, whatever is written there, and in the back page of the journal, please go through that and follow the instruction and the expectation of the journal, so that it will be easier for us to make a decision. Thank you.
Lakshman, please share the guidelines in the WhatsApp group, please.
Yes, I will post.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Lakshman, next session रे कौन अच्छी?
Next session history of philosophy paper presentation habo.
अच्छा ठीक है.
ସେଟା ଲକ୍ଷଣ ସେସନ ଲକ୍ଷଣ ସେଟା ଅଛି
ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଅଛି ଯେ ସାର୍ କରିବେ.
ଯନ୍ତ୍ର ମଣିଷ ସବୁ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଲ କରିବ
बढ़िया सर कंट्रोल करछि.
Sir.
Super fine.
so let us break and join again.
Thank you.